Well, blessed Tuesday to you as we come with your daily encouragement. And I just want to apologize for the lateness of this posting, but we are having a little busy day today. But we are in the book of Revelation, chapter 19. And it says here, we're going to do verses 6, 7, and 8 here today. And then remember, we've moved away from the worship of the multitude. We've gone to now the worship of the 24 elders and the four beasts, which represent the Gospels typically in most renderings. And we get closer to the throne where the praise of God is happening. And so in verse 6 it says, Then I heard what seemed to be the voice of a multitude, like the great sound of living water, and like the sound of the mighty thunderbolts crying out. Now, the multitude includes the 24 elders, includes the beast, and includes the whole people. And this is what they sing, Hallelujah! For the Lord our God, the Almighty, reigns. Let us rejoice and exult and give him glory. For the marriage of the Lamb has come, and his bride has made herself ready. To her it has been granted to be clothed with fine linen, bright and pure. For fine linen is the righteous deeds of the saints. Now I'm going to focus on that passage here. There are a few things that we need to learn from that. The biggest one is that it is the hymn of praise. And we've talked about that before when we have it in worship. And right now we're in Lent, so we typically just do the petitions to the Lord, Lord have mercy. But in the seasons, when we have the full hymn of praise, it is an imitation of what's going on in heaven. Now, typically that comes from two sources. One is the angels over Bethlehem when the shepherds were gathering, and the other being this scene from heaven. It is typically songs of hymns of praise. And they focus on a few words praise, Alleluia, the Lord reigning on high. It is something that is heavenly focused, not earthly focused. And that's a key distinction. Now, sometimes we might make a mistake in a hymn and we have one that's a little bit less heavenly focused, a little bit more on the situations of us down here below. That's okay at times, but if it is a hymn of praise, it is directed to heaven. And it is out of imitation of what we believe is happening in heaven, not just in the future. Now, if we just take a future look at this Revelation 19, we might say that this is what happens at the end of time. But we have to remember, too, that time is relative when it comes to God. A day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is like a day, as Peter says in one of his letters. It's a reminder that time is non existent when we get into heaven. I remember having someone quip who was more of an action type Christian, not necessarily a worship type Christian. And they were wondering about heaven being quite boring, and they wondered how long the worship services would last. You know, some people are kind of conscious that way. I know sometimes if I've getting a little long-winded or things last a few minutes longer, I know I have a few people that get a little upset with that. But I have others who don't mind it at all. And they ask that question. So is heaven just going to be one long worship service? And I always have to say that it is not, it's relative to time. Time doesn't exist in heaven. Also, our work and our worship belong together. And technically, that's supposed to be the case here on earth. I know sometimes if I'm doing some manual labor and stuff, I'll find myself singing hymns. And, you know, maybe if we look at the stereotypical scene of the South with a lot of slaves, there's a lot of singing going on. And a lot of times that's where we get some of our African American hymns, is from the singing and the praising from those who are working and praising God at the same time. Of course, their situation was one of desiring freedom, and a lot of times there's a lot of hidden meetings with, you know, the person in charge of me is like Pharaoh, and I want God to set me free. But work and worship go together. And so does the time in the presence of the Lord and the time in the presence of the world. If anything, we learn from the book of Revelation, and it is called, of course, the apocalypse, and that just means the revealing, is that eternity or heaven is as real as the reality that we see outside of ourselves. Now, we could get philosophical of whether we see reality or only we see a vision of reality. And to some extent, the book of Revelation reminds us that we need that supernatural vision to see that there are things going on behind the scenes here. And so we have to ask ourselves, are we already worshiping? And is that just like breathing? Is it specific worship? Explicit worship that is all we have in heaven, or is it a combination of the both? And I think it's the latter. We don't know whether we're going to be seeing the presence or just the presence is already there and we just are blind to it and sometimes we see it. Are we going to be out of time, or are we going to be influencing and helping people in prayer in time? There's a lot of things that are being revealed here with a lot more questions that keeps us open, that in the midst of all the suffering, and of course there's a lot of suffering going on in the world of our present day and also in the day of Revelation 19. And so the turning towards heaven and the turning towards earth are kind of considered relative to each other, to God being present, no matter whether we're looking towards our situation or whether we're looking towards heaven. But the model is to sing praises to God. For the Lord, the Almighty reigns. Let us rejoice and exult and give him glory. Now here's where it changes a little bit. For the marriage of the Lamb has come, and his bride has made herself ready. To her has been granted to be clothed with fine linen, bright and pure. Now, today at Central, we have an altar guild meeting, and part of that is the preparation of the temple, at least as we have it today, the temple of God here at this particular church. And part of that is to almost view it like a wedding feast. Each and every week, if not each and every time we have worship. And that goes back to the symbolism going back to the Old Testament, where the people of Israel were considered the bride and God is considered the bridegroom. The same constitutes in the marriage feast of the Lamb. Of course, that's referring to Jesus, who makes himself ready and the bride makes herself ready for the celebration. And that is one of the images of heaven, is that it is a long, big table. And of course, we think of Psalm 23, where the Lord prepares a table, even in the presence of our enemies. The Lord has a place for us at the banquet, the table of the Lord. And so we ask, is this in the future? Is this in the present? And we'd probably have to say, yes, it's in both. It is a reality that is parallel to ours, but has been revealed in Jesus Christ. So I invite you to look at this as not just something way, way off in the future, but something that we experience today. In fact, in one of the renditions of the hymn of praise, it says that as of today, the Lord reigns today, not just in the future, not just in the past. Today is always on heaven's time, not our own. And so Revelation 19 reveals that to us. God bless you today. We trust that these continue to be words of encouragement. Take care. God bless. We'll see you next time.